Welcome. My name is Michelle Teets. I work with Virginia Paving Company as a corporate safety manager. We're going to spend our time together here today focusing on safety within the asphalt plant setting. So let's start off with looking at when safety is not a value. While that video is clearly meant as a what we shouldn't do type of example, I think this video speaks to me because I don't think any of us want to learn safety by accident. Safety has to be valued by each of us and our co-workers to have a successful safety culture within our companies. The main objectives of today's training are really to understand the basics of plant safety and why safety is important within our facilities, hazard recognition, safety program assessment, and how to establish a safety culture that works. Before we get into plant-specific safety topics, let's talk about Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, 2018 statistics. Indicated on the slide are the number of fatalities that occurred within the construction industry. Of those fatalities, falls accounted for 33.5%. Each of these categories listed are OSHA's Focus 4 emphasis topics, which account for more than half of construction worker deaths nationwide. If these hazards could be eliminated, 591 lives in the U.S. each year could be saved. All of these hazards are present within the HMA plant setting, so the statistics are relevant even though they are for construction and not specifically general industry. I think all of us can agree, at the end of the day, we want every worker to make it home safely to their family and loved ones. In an effort to make our employees safe, OSHA mandates that we meet certain safety standards to maintain compliance. We also need to be concerned with the human component or the behaviors of our employees. The best way to start the work shift is in a daily huddle. These meetings have different names. To name a few, it's JSA, JHA, Daily Huddle, Toolbox Talks, Safety Talks. Whatever the name, the goal is at the beginning of the shift, the entire team gathers for 5 to 10 minutes to discuss the tasks for the shift and to identify what hazards are associated with the scope of work. Lastly, they talk about those hazards and how they're going to be mitigated. So let's identify some hazards that exist at the plant, and we will discuss several of these in depth in the upcoming slides. There are many areas within the plant that burns can occur. Hot oil line surfaces, liquid AC, and tack transfer points are a couple. Maintenance frequently occurs at heights, so there is a need for a fall protection program. Electrical rooms and high voltage create hazards for our employees, and equipment in operation in our facilities, along with vehicle traffic, are definitely a safety concern. The question is, who is at your plant? On any given day at a typical asphalt plant, there are numerous people that could be on site, both asphalt plant employees as well as numerous visitors that might only be there for the day or even just a few minutes. Therefore, it's critical that steps are taken and procedures are put in place to ensure the safety of anyone that might be on site for any length of time. Keep in mind, non-employees of the asphalt plant are quite possibly at a higher risk of injury due to their lack of familiarity with the plant operations and safety protocol. Typically, our plant yards have a lot of movement between truck traffic, equipment moving around, workers and visitors on foot, and these individuals present potential hazards such as runover, backing incidents, distractions, lack of PPE, unfamiliar with the plant setting, different safety cultures. Sometimes there's congested areas. So what can we put into place to minimize the exposure to these folks? One of the tools we can put into place to get equipment, vehicles, and workers on foot and pedestrians safely around our sites is to implement an internal traffic control plan, commonly known as an ITCP. An ITCP is a process that supervisors and others who have responsibility for the plant site can use to coordinate and control the flow of construction vehicles, equipment, and workers operating on site, basically creating zones designed to minimize interaction between workers on foot and vehicles and equipment. With an ITCP, you would plan traffic flow to minimize backing, establish access and egress points for the site, pedestrian walkways, areas where workers on foot are prohibited, equipment operating zones, identify employee parking areas, and determine maximum travel speed limits for the facility. The plan communicates this information to all parties operating in the vicinity of one another. Operational hazards are any condition or act that affects or may affect the safety of employees or associated personnel or equipment. Within our plants, there are many types of operational hazards, some of which are electrocution, struck by, caught between, and falls, which we talked about in the earlier slide with the Osha statistics, and confined spaces. So let's talk about a few of these more in depth. There are many electrical components that require lockout tag out at your plants. For example, the drum, baghouse, motors, conveyors, burners, possible energy centers, pug mills, controlled energy sources, and screens, just to name a few. Lockout tag out is very important in the safety of our personnel and in order to perform maintenance. We must be able to lock out the energy to these components so that there is zero way that they can be powered on while we are performing repairs. While not a substitute for competent person lockout tag out training, let's identify the proper steps. To begin a shutdown, of course, we have to prepare. We're going to shut down, turn off equipment, isolate the energy source, apply the lockout tag out to the energy isolating device, release all potentially hazardous stored or residual energy, and most importantly, we're going to verify the isolation before the work begins. Then to start up, it's basically the process in reverse. Most important step here is to assure that all personnel are aware the startup's going to begin and that everyone is all clear. What is also required training in the plant setting is NFPA 70E non-qualified or qualified electrical training, depending on the employee's role. To put these definitions into working day practice, a qualified individual is one that, as part of their job responsibilities, works with or may be exposed to live energized electrical components. The rest of the staff that does not have these functions or exposure are considered unqualified. One or more common burn hazards at the plant is related to asphalt cement. This product is continuously being delivered, offloaded, stored, and pumped through the mixing operation of the plant, all of which is being done while the asphalt cement is at an elevated temperature to reduce its viscosity and allow it to be mixed with the aggregate components. When producing asphalt, plant production temperatures are elevated enough so that the final mixture can be loaded out at temperatures in the range of 300 degrees. This requires many parts of the plant to reach extreme temperatures, and care must be taken to protect personnel from these areas. Also, the material components must be held at elevated temperatures to ensure that the final mixture meets the spec requirements. There are numerous opportunities for problems to occur, and without proper procedures and PPE, personnel can come into contact with hot asphalt cement. It is imperative that danger warning signs are displayed properly and that first aid burn instructions, like those seen on the left, are followed to ensure immediate and appropriate care is taken. Access to emergency showers should be considered near AC transfer areas. Be mindful to stay out of equipment operating zones or EOZs. Establish visual or verbal communication with operators and drivers when you intend to cross in front or behind them, and once you've passed in front or behind, make communication to let that operator or driver know you're all clear. There are many blind spots on the equipment and vehicles. If you can't see the driver or operator, then they can't see you. Never assume. Backup alarms should be installed and functioning on all moving equipment such as loaders, skid steers, backhoes, and haul trucks. There are several areas on the plant where falling material poses a hazard, such as waste chutes and on the backside of the cold feed bins. These areas should have posted signage and access should be limited. Tools and items can and have been dropped from elevated platform areas. Several years ago, we had workers performing repairs on the baghouse. One worker was hoisting up small pieces of angle iron by rope, while the other worker was on the top of the baghouse approximately 50 foot above ground surface, ready to unload the material at the top. He untied the metal. At that point, he lost his grip on the material and it fell into the worker below. Fortunately, while he sustained injuries, they were not life-threatening. Ground level areas that could be impacted by work above should have a controlled access zone identified with temporary perimeter protection measures. How necessary tools and materials will get to the upper maintenance areas should be considered pre-task. And the last struck by I want to mention is material falling from the wrong silo onto the hood of a truck being loaded. While this type of incident is entirely preventable, it does occur and can cause injury and damage. Operators should be focused solely on loadout and always visually ensure that the truck is under the correct silo before loadout commences. Around the typical asphalt plant, there are numerous moving parts. Some of these moving parts include conveyor belts, motors, gears, crushers, screens, and drag chains. Typically, if the hazard can be reached under 7 foot, these moving parts should be properly guarded to prevent plant personnel and/or visitors from coming into contact with them. Guarding is important, and workers should be trained not to bypass guards. One of the worst injuries I've dealt with in the plant setting involved just that, an individual bypassing the guard pictured lower left. He heard a noise and was trying to assess the bearing located behind the guard. He decided to go against procedure and placed his hand behind the guard onto the bearing housing, and at that very moment, his jacket sleeve got pulled into the rotating drum trunnion. He was able to get freed, but not before sustaining a very severe finger injury. Again, as a reminder, when routine maintenance or attention is needed, appropriate lockout tag out procedures should be followed. There are several places at the plant where we will find confined spaces, some of which are the bag house, cold feed bins, silos, the drum, pug mills, drainage structures, and tanks. A confined space means it's a space that, 1, is large enough and so configured that an employee can bodily enter and perform assigned work, and has a limited access or restricted means for entry or exit, and is not designed for continuous employee occupancy. Specific training for entry into confined spaces is required. A permit required confined space meets the definition of a confined space plus has one or more of the following characteristics. Has an internal configuration such that an entrant could be trapped or asphyxiated by inwardly converging walls or by a floor which slopes downwards and tapers to a smaller cross-section, or contains any other serious safety or health hazards. Some confined spaces may require air quality monitoring and an active removal system. During entry, air monitoring equipment tests the atmosphere for dangers such as oxygen deficiency or enrichment. Competent person confined space training can provide guidance on when those measures are needed. Around the plant, there are many daily operational and/or routine maintenance tasks that require workers to be at elevated positions, which could lead to either serious injury or death in the case of a fall. Some of these instances include work to perform from step or extension ladders or man lifts, sampling mix on the sampling rack, working on top of the silos or the bag house, walking on catwalks, or simply getting on and off large equipment. In many of these cases, proper utilization of harnesses and other safety gear practices should be followed to prevent falls. 3-point contact is a safety practice that should be used and used properly. 2 hands, 1 foot, or 2 feet, 1 hand. You want to hold on with good grip, even if your center descent is not far, in the case your footing slips. If you had to face forward to climb up, face forward to climb down. Never jump from equipment or vehicles. There are OSHA standards in place regarding fixed ladders. OSHA 1920.28 requires that each employee is protected from falling in a ladderway floor hole or a ladderway platform hole by a guardrail system and tow boards erected on all exposed sides, except at the entrance to the hole where a self-closing gate or an offset must be used. The yellow self-closing gate pictured at the top of the fixed ladder is what many of our plants have been outfitted with due to this requirement. Maintenance to the drag conveyor is not done frequently, but there are some fall considerations to be considered. Take a look at the top left photo. That is the main drag conveyor on its side while they perform repairs to the drag chain. When the drag is in its normal upright position, the handrails are sufficient for fall protection, but when placed horizontally, the handrail does not meet the required height and a fall hazard exists for workers. Additionally, proper access means should be considered. Is that step ladder the right ladder for the job? We have briefly mentioned a couple maintenance hazards during previous slide discussion. Routine equipment maintenance is going to occur. Tasks such as welding and cutting, changing bags in the bag house, changing flights in the drum, changing belts, or simply addressing hydraulic leaks are eventually going to be necessary. So when it does, always practice good safety procedures such as lockout tag out in the buddy system. Any tank welding and hot work should have special consideration as these operations are high risk. The use of cranes for maintenance is sometimes necessary. Make sure trained personnel are operating the crane and assisting with rigging and signaling. And as a reminder, there are specific requirements when critical crane lifts are being performed. Hand and power tools need to be inspected prior to use and always utilize the right tool for the job. Pneumatic tools are commonly used during maintenance. In the photo, you can see an individual using an impact gun in the drum to remove nuts from flights for replacement. While he was backing the nut off, his left hand got caught between the handle of the impact gun and the drum, which led to a first aid caught between injury, even though he was wearing gloves. Was this the right tool for the job he was doing? Air compressor connections should be secured to eliminate the possibility of hose disconnection during use. There are some health hazards that are encountered at our plants. There should be team members certified in first aid and CPR at our facilities. Industrial hygiene testing should be conducted to determine if thresholds are or are not being exceeded for hearing and respiratory requirements. In 2018, Osha rolled out mandated respirable silica dust standards within general industry that apply to our operations. These standards can be found in 1910.1053. Varied shift and long work hours could lead to fatigue for our plant personnel. Hours and shifts should be managed to minimize this potential hazard. With all the work and activities that occur daily, the potential is high for areas of the plant not to receive the attention it needs to stay neat and orderly. Work areas like the shop and/or lab will see lots of activity while the plant is in production, and if ignored, can quickly become cluttered or disorganized. Areas at the plant that usually need routine attention are under conveyors, around the scale house, within storage room and containment areas, on catwalks and electrical rooms. If ignored, trip hazards and/or injury from falling objects can occur. When a storage room is kept orderly, it not only eliminates slip, trip, fall hazards, but also saves time. If someone is looking for a specific tool or repair part, they don't have to waste valuable time rummaging around through several places to find it. Conducting a safety walkthrough of your site is important and determines what hazards exist in your workplace and what PPE is required for specific tasks. At my company, we utilize what we call a MESH inspection, MESH standing for Mechanical, Environmental, Safety, and Health. Individuals from these departments partner on a monthly basis to conduct walkthroughs because these folks are looking at the facility from different perspectives. An audit process should be developed to identify deficiencies. If abatements are discovered, the process should assign personnel responsibility and provide timelines for needed corrections. Establish personnel training needs and within what frequency that training should be conducted. Look for ways to reach out to the local emergency services that would be called on to respond when something goes wrong at our facilities. By inviting them to visit your plant site and familiarize themselves with your daily operations and equipment, it can assist them in developing a crisis plan to respond if the need ever arises. There might also be an opportunity to perform drills with first responders to plan for the unexpected. One of the best ways to promote safety around your asphalt plant is by keeping your workers involved. If the crew is kept engaged and part of the program, they will begin to work as a team towards establishing and maintaining a safe work environment, which leads to a stronger safety culture. If you're utilizing the safety huddles I talked about in an earlier slide, this provides an excellent opportunity to engage team members about safety, even having them point out potential safety hazards. Our frontline folks are the ones performing the work, and they have good ideas. We need to be willing to listen to their ideas and implement those that will work to improve the overall safety of the workplace. Promote an atmosphere of sharing best practices with one another, especially those that are new to the plant crew. Be a team. Going home safely every day to the worker's family has to be a real, true value. It's not just fatalities that impact families. The latter is so true. A life-changing injury not only impacts the employee, but their whole family or support system. Why do you work safely? And why most importantly, do I work safely? I think we all have the same reasons: to be able to do the things we want to do in life, and the biggest one, for our family and ourselves. How do we preserve a company's greatest value? What we allow, we teach. If we don't take the time to correct a bad safety behavior or condition, as leaders, we are teaching our employees these behaviors and conditions are acceptable. We must walk it like we talk it. Our employees are looking up to us as mentors and leaders, and we should lead by example, not practice a do as I say, not as I do approach. As construction leaders, we owe it to our folks to promote safety. It's just that simple. Thank you so much for your attention during this presentation.